break, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Um, it was
It, it,
for
it was it was
very
needed.
important, definitely not scheming, scamming college tests.
AP exams, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
So what
Uh,
exams did you have again?
Trevor Packer cooked up some stuff for me. AP Environmental Science, AP Physics, AP US History, AP English.
So we have just now started to enter the first spring ever in the Chirac conflict zone. Um, and it's hot.
It was very hot. Now it's not so hot, but then it's gonna get back to very hot in a few days.
My point is, it's hot, right?
Yeah.
And our AP exams are in the hottest place in the whole entire school. Consequently, during my physics C exam, some kid had his shirt off by the end of it.
Oh my god.
I'm
Seniors just
pretty
don't
sure it's
care.
allowed. I'm pretty sure it's allowed. As far as I know, there's nothing wrong with doing that. So I will treat it as such. All right, long opening. Hello, my name is Eris. Welcome back to Calfire Crackpots. Today we're getting into the social causes of climate change, the long-awaited series.
Yep, my name's Declan. We'll be talking a lot about why climate change happens and why it's our fault.
Yeah, and in case when I'm going into the news real quickly, we're experimenting with an audio-only format, real quick. More so, it's not, I didn't have time to make slides this week. It is, I'm experimenting with different mediums of the podcast. So on YouTube, I'd recommend that you just go over to Spotify or Anchor or Apple or wherever and listen there instead of here. Um, but let's get into the news. Um, Clarence Thomas is mad that the Supreme Court has no credibility. Just
Yeah.
that's the so man, that's the draft decision saying that the decision should be returned to the states is such a what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
Like
everything
like like,
that
like
everything that's been ruled on a national level is eventually like that's the whole goal. They want to reverse the ruling that allows gay marriage on a national level, and they want to say, "Oh,
yeah,
well, it's a state's right to choose and please and
and it's
pick whether or not their citizens deserve rights."
it's it, it was only a matter of time. I think all the entirety of the left kind of saw the writing on the wall. That's why, everyone's been hounding their legislatures to either make anti-abortion laws or pro-abortion laws to kind of set those into stone after what happens. I mean, states like California that'll flat out pay for a woman to come and have an abortion regardless of where they are, which is hella cool. Um, and then states like Texas considering the death penalty because they're so pro-life that they'll kill you.
Yeah, that sounds a little counterintuitive.
That one seemed a little extremist. I don't think that one's gonna go anywhere. But it's just it's so divisive. And going back to now that APUSH is over, I have no incentive to care. But the whole principle of was having states a good idea?
Yeah.
Like what was having completely different bodies of government, all with their own constitutions, a good idea? And there's arguments for both sides, obviously, but I have my grand plan for America. This is my Senator Armstrong type of stuff right here. So we divide America into probably about 7 or 8 or 5 or so regions, all states that having the same political disposition. So there's a Midwest Rust Belt, Northeast, like East Coast, Deep South, Southwest region, and they become separate countries for 50 years. And in those 50 years, they're allowed to go to war, they're allowed to do whatever the hell they want, but they have to have friendly relations with each other. And they can do whatever policy they want. And there has to be free immigration between all those countries. And at the end of a period of like 50 years, they all get together and they look at which country did it the best. And then they all have to rejoin each other with that country's policies.
Yeah, I mean, it would
Sort
work
of, sort of,
certainly.
sort of like a Lord of the Flies trial by fire stuff, but I probably wouldn't join up so peacefully afterwards.
It would probably be, oh wait, our way is better. Don't
Yeah,
look at the economy. Don't look at the economy.
this is
Trust
the
us
this.
on this. Our way is better.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it's more so a European Union simulator.
Yeah,
It's all the states try to get back together, and none of them can agree on which one.
forced
Um,
balkanization of the United States.
yeah, just Roe v. Wade is just such a even if abortion, even if that falls, it just means so much more for everything else, for any minority community, for any um, state versus federal government issue. And it's also it's so weird because abortion isn't as divisive of a topic as people as the news or the left or the right would have you believe. It's most people believe that exceptions for reasonable exceptions pre-fetal viability is common sense for abortion laws, and if that's the compromise we have to agree on, then that's a fine compromise for everyone involved. And I see very few women on the pro-life side.
Yeah,
I just wanted to point that out. It's like if you see a protest outside an abortion clinic, there's a few around here. I've kind of like biked past a few recently, and it's there's like the usual crowd up there, and it's all old white men. Like there's very few women out there, but at
I
a
mean,
pro-choice protest, it's full of women, and
the
obviously
main
there's
factor behind like people being against abortion is at the end of the day, they're not really comfortable with it. There are
yeah
ethical obligations that some people have, but really, like, I think most people can agree that those can be tossed aside in certain extenuating circumstances.
yeah. And did you see the shit that Biden like his speech once like after this draft leaked? It was the most sociopathic shit. It was just like, well, Jack, you'd better get out there and vote. Like
Ugh.
it's like shouting to someone while they're getting stabbed that, well, you should have supported the police or something to that effect. It's like an updated trolley problem where it's now you can stop the trolley at any time, but if you stop the trolley, you won't be able to fundraise about stopping the trolley.
Yeah, it's no, I told you so's. We're here right now. Whoever's in legislature is in legislature. That's a thing for next election.
Yeah, and it's like I know about Mansion. I know about the filibuster. I know that things are super gridlocked with the left kind of being so fractured and dispersed and not in lockstep because the majority party is never in lockstep when they're in the majority.
Yeah.
They're only in lockstep when they're on the defensive. But if you tell a swing voter that the terms that there was a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic House of Representatives, and they lost abortion, that's a hard sell. That's a really hard sell. And I can say there is no way the Democrats won't eat shit in the midterms and they have no one to blame but themselves.
The thing about the Democratic Party that I mean, I believe I've said this before. The reason I think that they haven't been able to actually get anything done for such a long time is because we're so divided over just minutia all the time.
Yeah.
The
And
Republican
that's that.
Party has this ability of, oh, that guy looks pretty good, and the entire party just gets behind someone's back, and um, maybe that's better. Maybe we don't need a national convention with like 19 possible
Yeah.
candidates.
And that's in general too. And it's like I was taken from other podcasts, but like the left won't stoop to the level of the Republicans. It's it, it's just so different. They won't fight dirty. The Republicans will take away people's rights or wherever, or do 21-hour long filibusters to succeed or go through all these backdoor means to confirm justices at the 11th hour, but the left won't do that. It's either a lack of confidence or some moral superiority.
Yeah.
And I think that America, in a lot of ways, is less divided than people would have you believe. I think that when when the time comes, if 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 there is going to be a time where we're going to need to overthrow the government, I think we're going to be taking up arms right alongside the rednecks. Because I
Yeah.
think that in a lot of ways they don't support the government curtailing the rights of people. I don't think they support a lot of the stuff. I think as a society we get hung up on all the little stuff, and the little stuff is a lot less important than rights, than First Amendment's Bill of Rights shit. And I think it matters more that we find common ground with people, because as we'll get into, the problem with America isn't division. Well, it is division, but there's a reason for that. The next news item is similarly non-cheerful. This was probably the worst mass shooting of the year.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a while since we've seen something like this.
I remember that weekend or that week. It was like a few years ago when it was just one after another for like a week. It was
Yeah.
that one week where it was like one every day. It's like the one where like three WalMarts got shot up. That was like coming off the heels of Parkland too. And you guys watch the news. If any if anyone out there is watching this, like y'all watch the news. Y'all know what's happening in the world. But my take is that I think the mass shooting issue at this point has moved beyond guns, because
Yeah.
the gun issue always comes up around a mass shooting and then fizzles out. It's not about guns. Someone could easily carry out a mass shooting with a gun that is small. I don't know. I don't know about guns, but
Yeah. But
you get the idea. It's
it's
not.
more and more of all of the shootings that have been happening are either racially motivated, um, motivated by ethnicity or nationality. I know there was one a while back motivated on sexuality at a nightclub.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's not because someone has a gun and says, I'm going to do evil things with this gun. I can't control myself. It's someone that says, I can't control myself. I want to hurt this group of people. And they get a gun. And
yeah.
the problematic part is that they got the gun, but it's not as if preventing them from getting the gun would have stopped it. It would have just made it less violent.
Like
The issue
I'm.
is addressing why there are so many people that believe that violence is the right answer.
I was kind of poring over every time I see a headline like this. I always kind of got to stop and think, and I think I finally figured it out on the why America is like this. And I think it's a breakdown of trust in social institutions in general. Um, I think over the last few decades, we've seen pretty much every hallowed social institution have their credibility completely blown away. I think the presidency began its slow decline with Nixon. I think Congress kind of lost it with Gingrich. I think that the Supreme Court finally did. It was kind of the nail in the coffin. The police kind of held on, but 2020 just finally completely lost it. And church and religion, kind of through their scandals piling up, have kind of lost credibility in the eyes of the atheist or the moderate. But I think that the only way America is going to be socially healthy into the future, because the problem with mass shootings is people thinking that they have the right to kill another human being. That's always been the problem. And whether it's branching out to meet new people, to talk to new people, to gather new points of view, to form a community organization, to maybe, I don't know, go so far as to wave to a police officer who you know was doing their job right. I think that rebuilding trust in social institutions is a slow movement, but it's one that really does need to happen.
Yeah, there's
That's
I do agree with you. There's a worrying gap in between the public, the perceived public, the opinion of the
hmm
collective that we see in
yeah.
media, and then the actual, influencers. So the media itself, it's less of a player now, but newspapers and written articles, what is it, religion, TV, movies. There are so many different things that all, in their very own subtle way, promote the same idea, one that's distorted from the actual reality.
hmm Yeah, there's this documentary. It's like one of those Nat Geo documentaries that are like like nobody knows about them, but they're really well done for no reason. But it was a world without oil, and the premise was just oil wells all went dry at the same time everywhere in the world at like in our modern day, and it went something like it followed everything that would happen. So the immediate breakdown of food transportation networks, emergency services, like no more plastics, like no more hospital equipment, medical gloves, and like the slow breakdown of social infrastructure and services. But then eventually, you know, algae growing, still being able to use natural gas for essential plastics, being able to mine lithium for electric cars and electric ships and biodiesel and everything. And then it kind of went into 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the future. And at every step in the way, humanity was becoming more and more like everything was better. Like, they were terrace farming in cities or urban farming or moving south or doing what they had to do. And eventually, 40 years after, humanity had completely recovered. And, you know, that. And the allegory I'm getting at is not about oil, although it would be poignant for this podcast. It's going towards what uprooting a social institution looks like. It's here we are. The oils ran out at the same instant. All the trust is gone. Now it must be slowly, slowly, slowly be built back up. And I think they might have gotten the time frame right in terms of 40 years because this stuff takes a long time. But
Yeah,
it's like
that's
that
about a
quote.
generation, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like that quote. The best time to plant a forest was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Yeah,
Yeah. So honestly, I think this is truly one of the movements that, unlike climate change, where it's fairly ambiguous to the individual, this one's fairly easy as an individual to fix. I mean, just I don't know.
yeah, do
You
your
need
part.
get more involved in your community. Go out and meet your neighbors. Go out and make new friends. Become connected. Become a member of the community. Community organizations. If you're not religious, that's fine. Start some type of, I don't know, reading group. Just the more that we can connect with each other, these divisions are going to go away because we're going to realize that people aren't so different. We just get
Yeah,
hung up on the details.
prevent isolation, prevent
Yeah,
people from
absolutely.
being polarized by dangerous sources, and prevent those people from coming to their own realization that may not be true. And that realization is incredibly dangerous for everyone around them.
Absolutely. And it's just, yeah, just do your part, man. So, a few articles that I'd like to look at. Um, one of them is from kind of an infinite generator for kind of stupid ideas and bad takes, the Atlantic Ideas section.
Ooh,
But I'm not on the Atlantic Ideas section. So this is this is a piece by Robinson Meyer. I'm trying to find the about him section. It looks like he's the staff writer at the Atlantic. So I guess kind of a bigwig there. And this was written in April 27th, so a few weeks ago. And this was in response to the newest IPCC report about climate change. and the article is titled "There is no scenario in which 2050 is normal. Two paths to avoid the worst of climate change would still dramatically change the world as we know it." All right. Earlier this month, the United Nations led IPCC released the latest volume in its current synthesis report, its omnibus summary of what humanity knows about the climate. As I wrote at the time, while the other volumes focus on the impacts of climate change, this newest report narrows in on how to prevent it. One of the main tools that the volume uses to estimate how we might avert climate catastrophe is so-called energy system models. These are complicated computer programs that simulate the global economy's use of energy in all its guises: coal, natural gas, wind, solar, and what happens because the greenhouse gas is burned. That is a really cool program. I'd have to get my hands on that.
Yeah.
I guess simulating every economy. That's. Huh.
How do people do that? Simulations that are so macro that it's, you know,
Okay, so let's. So that this is kind of just. This is the exploratory section, so they're saying what's happening. So here's
hmm
where the takes start. Of the hundreds of scenarios that the IPCC analyzed, all fell into one of three buckets. In the first bucket, every scenario forecasts that the world will soon be removing tens of gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere every year. Carbon removal is still a bit of a dream. Not only is it technologically unproven at scale, it is extremely energy intensive. But the IPCC report implies that within the lifetime of children alive today, the world might be spending more than a third of its total energy production removing carbon from the atmosphere, according to Zeke Housefather, who's an author on the IPCC. Okay, I could see that as possible. I mean, carbon capture that we looked at is still part of the solution, because the bigger question of climate change is how to restore the carbon cycle as it was meant to be.
yeah.
So
It's
I could see that being possible.
it may be possible. I think that's a very idealistic look. I think that
Yeah, I think
in
bucket.
reality
Go
we
ahead.
have to stop everything in its tracks right now, and only then can we
Mm.
start to think about how do we trap the
Yeah,
carbon that's in the atmosphere, how do we sequester it, and eventually lead to a smaller loop in the carbon cycle. But
it, yeah.
as we
Kind of
know
talking about
from
carbon capture right now is a little bit of trying to sprint before you can crawl.
yeah, as we
All right,
talked about
so
in the episode on climate solutions, the carbon
the stupid
sequestering
one or the
route
good
is
one?
really just a drop in the bucket right now. The
Oh,
technology is
absolutely.
too young, and it doesn't address the fact that the source of carbon is still being created.
All right. Yeah, so they mentioned the world won't derive any immediate economic gain from this waste management exercise. God, you know it's an Atlantic article and they immediately go to like the, but what about the economy, though?
Yeah.
Um, it won't turn all that carbon into something useful. It will simply need to spend what could equal trillions of dollars a year on carbon removal to help rein in climactic upheaval. What's more, this mass removal will need to happen while the world does everything else that decarbonization entails, such as building wind farms and solar farms, expanding public transit, and switching to EVs. Every climate plan, every climate policy you've ever heard about will need to happen while tens of gigatons of carbon removal revs up in the background. Yep. This may sound unbelievable, but now let's turn our attention to the second bucket. They tell a different story, one in which the world rapidly curtails its energy use over the next 2 decades, slashing carbon pollution not only from rich countries, but also middle income countries such as Brazil, Pakistan, and India. Sure.
Yeah,
By
sure.
curtailing, yeah, by curtailing energy demand, I'm not talking about the standard energy transition, green growth situation, where the world produces more energy every year and just has a larger and larger share of it coming from zero carbon sources. Rather, these scenarios imagine a world where total global energy demand collapses in the next few decades. There's a good reason for this. As far as models are concerned, this tactic is one of the best ways to crash carbon pollution. But that's not how any country approaches climate policy. I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah.
I, the nature of a civilization is to require more energy. Uh, Definitely, energy will need to come from greener sources, but you can't. Energy means development, and development means energy. You can't. You can't slash energy. You'd essentially be sending humanity backward. All right, sure. But
Yeah.
one of the things I do agree with is coming up next. So they talk about car ownership. So we talked about cars are only about 30% efficient in terms of converting the chemical energy of gasoline into kinetic energy on the road. Most of it's lost in heat. So stuff like that, I guess increasing efficiency would technically reduce energy produced.
Hmm.
They assume that the number of cars will go from 1.3 billion to 2.21 billion by 2050, of which less than half will be EVs. It's probably correct.
Yeah. Sounds about
But
right.
the yeah, so that's the U.S. Energy Information Administration. But the report would require the global vehicle fleet to nearly halve during the same time period, shrinking to about 850 million cars and light trucks.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. You
yeah,
see,
okay. They're saying it's not likely. I think they got that one.
there's just this continued problem of we need to solve our energy crisis, but we can't ever stop creating more energy. I think
Yeah,
that comes back to, is the world growing at an unnaturally fast rate? Which, I mean, it is, but how do we address that?
yeah, yeah, and it gets to. I mean, think about it is basic as as carrying capacity. The concept that an ecosystem can only support a certain amount of a certain species. I think that humanity is over its care. That if humanity, like, there was some report, and it was if humanity wants to continue living as it's living now, like in terms of consumption, energy production, carbon, and keep the world in equilibrium, the population could only be about 2 billion.
Yeah, we'd need about 4.3 Earths or around there in order to sustain what we have right now.
Yeah, which isn't, I mean, like, given the fact that by 2100, the human population is expected to be only about 5 billion people, I don't think that's as hard of a sell because the birth rate is development means that a birth rate goes down and development is occurring rapidly. And seeing that the US is pretty much has been below replacement level for almost a generation, and we're starting to see the effects of that. Like when is the US, like, I don't think they, because immigration is so strong, I don't expect the US population to start decreasing for quite a while. But in terms of births, I think that I think that's already, if there were no immigrants, the US population would be falling, correct?
Yeah, I think the thing you said about carrying capacity is really interesting because that's a concept that's so universally accepted in all ecological fields. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone apply it to humans
Like
so
me,
far.
we may got mechanical keyboards, we may got the dollar that we made up, we may got rectangles that we tap until food comes to our door, but we're just fucking animals, man. We're animals, but
I mean,
we
we're
require
not we're not
food,
immune to the
water,
laws of nature.
oxygen. That we need all the stuff that animals need. It makes sense that we'd have our own limits. Because that's interesting. Because I've always thought about that, and like ever since I heard the term like carrying capacity and how it was like talked about with like environmental studies, I was like, oh, of course, it's the same thing for humans. But you're right. I've not, all my research for the 30 episodes we've done, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it's a very it's a take that feels very real. It's
Hmm.
some how do I describe it? The idea of carrying capacity feels so relevant in the conversation of, what do we do with 4 more billion people?
Yeah, it's there's some people have tried to deal with this. So if you all out there ever think that Vox is a credible news source, its founder, Matthew Iglesias, has wrote quite a few interesting books with some interesting takes. He the tweet or a book. I'm gonna look this up because I want to make sure I do it justice. Okay, so this is yeah. So Matthew Iglesias, his article is different places have different safety rules, and that's okay. And this was after that um, textile factory collapse in Bangladesh that killed like 90 people.
Ooh, what was the
And there were
justification for that take?
the justification. So the reasons that, well, having a safe job is good, money is also good. Jobs that are unusually dangerous in the contemporary US, that's primarily fishing, logging, and trucking, pay a premium over other working class occupations precisely because people are reluctant to risk death or maiming at work. And in a risk free society, it's good that people are able to make different choices on the risk reward spectrum. So I'm
What?
basic. So his argument is that it makes sense that it's good that people should be allowed to weigh the pros and cons of putting their life on the line.
My brother, there was no pros or cons. They literally work to live. So does everyone
Yeah,
else.
and it's like yeah, if you work in a coal mine, you don't have a choice in a
That's
lot of
like
instances.
that's under the assumption that every person in a coal mine or any other dangerous field of labor chose to be there and they can make the choice at any time to, you know, go for some white collar job. That's not
Yeah,
true.
and it's one of his inspirations is a book called No One Makes You Shop at Walmart, which you can guess the interpretation of that. It's
Why don't poor
no,
people stop being poor? Shopping at
it's
doing
one of
poor people things is what makes them poor.
it's one of those. It's like it's not really the fault of everyone that a company became so predatory that it's hard to not use it. Like I use Amazon. I use it quite frequently. They got a lot of stuff. It's very convenient to use. It's cheaper. I'd rather not use them. I try to not use them when I can, but it's like this the other day. So I was trying to buy a day planner for this summer and next year. So all right, I let's see if I can find a day planner direct from the company. Okay, that I had this year. Oh, damn, they only have an Amazon store. All right. Well, can I get it from any like stationary shops or anywhere around here? Oh, there's no stationary shops around here because Amazon put them all out of business. All right. I'm just gonna go to an actual store. I went to Target. They didn't have it. All right, I'm gonna look at Target's website. Oh shit, they have it, but I need to pay $35 before I can buy it, which was really stupid. I could only buy it if I paid $35 and other crap. Like, all right, Amazon has it. Wow, it's really cheap. Wow, I can get it the next day. It's stuff like that. Like such a mundane, low stakes example as that just kind of
Yeah,
disproves the entire claim they're trying to make here. It's that yes, through yes, no one made me shop at Walmart when it was a small mom and pop store by the Walton twins in, I don't know, Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania. But
it's in
when it's
Arkansas,
a
but yeah, go on.
yeah, wait, was it in Arkansas? Okay.
It's in Arkansas,
Um,
as all things of the devil are.
yes.
Shout out to Arkansas
Um,
users. Um, Shout out to
Arkansas
Arkansas
users.
watchers of this podcast. We hope you escape soon.
All right. So now going on the Atlantic article. Yeah, so they're saying it's not likely that the amount of cars is going to have by 2050. Historically, energy efficiency has only improved by about 2% a year, and low energy demand scenarios require much faster shifts. Oh, and by the way, these low energy demand scenarios require a huge amount of carbon removal too, something like 3 billion tons of it. Even with a low energy demand, there's still a fair amount of carbon removal deployed. It's just a 3 to 5 gigaton range, which is 1 billion tons, rather than 5 to 15 gigaton range, which is the Housefather guy. He wrote the report. Then there's the third bucket, which is probably where we're going. In these scenarios, in the new report, humanity fails to limit global temperature growth to 1.5 degrees Celsius, blowing past the more ambitious of the Paris Agreement's climate goals. Passing 1.5 degrees means that the world could encounter deadly droughts, mass migrations, and fatal outdoor temperatures by the middle of the century. Um, I think we've already arrived. Perhaps you can see
Yeah.
the problem. None of these
Every year there's
outcomes.
always that one day in India where the concrete melts on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and every day there's that like week in Chicago. It's like nobody's immune to it. That's the 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 sick beauty of climate change. It's that you can't escape it,
Yeah.
and I'm just gonna move on. So their beef with the buckets is that the first and most significant is that humanity must invest more in carbon removal as quickly as possible. Okay, it's a bad take. So far, most of the money spent on carbon removal has come from the private sector. I wrote about Stripe's effort, but the funding to remove billions of tons a year can only come from the government. Based. Many climate thinkers hope that the federal government will step in and administer carbon removal as a public waste management service, at least in the US. There's currently little bipartisan political will to do so, but it is beyond past time to begin implementing that. The second is that coping with climate change will require a disruption on a scale that our political system has yet to comprehend. In some cases, that disruption will become beforehand and prevent the damage. In others, it will result from the damage. But it will come nonetheless. If I asked you 40 years from now, will only about 5% of Americans own a car, or will the world spend a large share of its energy production sucking carbon from the atmosphere? You would rightly respond that neither sounded particularly realistic. And that is the point. We have been backed into a corner. The scale of change that headed our way is unimaginable, and it is also inevitable. That's a pretty good ending. Um, I think that's a good introduction on the social impacts of climate change because the social impacts of climate change is very much sacrifice zones and um, like toxic factories being like in low income neighborhoods or just the reality of lower income neighborhoods being in physically lower lying areas on coastal cities. But I think this is good because it is the literal definition of the word, the social aspect of climate change is what do people think of the fact that whether or not you think it's going to happen or whether or not there's political will to do it, only about 5% of Americans will own a car, and the world will spend a large share of its energy production sucking carbon from the atmosphere, whether or not we do anything about climate change.
Yeah. That's
Whether
just
or not whether or not we stepped in about the Nazis 5 years or 10 years after, we'd still be in World War II. World War II still would have happened whether or not Pearl Harbor happens. I don't know. That was kind of a shitty analogy, but you get the point.
I mean, yeah, I get what you mean. It's a very shocking take, but it is admittedly a shockingly realistic one. And it's tough to cope with that fact when you first hear it, but then you start realizing the direction we're going and also the direction we'll have to go, and eventually it seems like it's the way
And
we
it's what
will go.
this isn't like it isn't the status quo. I mean, in I hate to sound like this, but I think at some point humanity needs to start preparing for a fundamental reversal of globalization in terms of it might be exceedingly difficult or impossible to get things from overseas. You might have to, instead of going out like going on AliExpress and buying something, you might have to be friends with a metal fabricator who owns a machine shop and have them make it for you or learn these skills. And there was like kind of an interesting thing that I thought about is this guy who figured out how to make his own of Invisalign by he had pirated the program that they used to make all the different molds to make the all the different retainers, and it's just a resin 3D printer and a vacuum former to make the shells. And I was thinking, like, I hope a guy in my commune's gonna have one of those.
Yeah.
And it's just like, will it get to a point where the tools that you will have available to you and the resources you'll have at your disposal will be from the where you live? And I don't know. I I think that society very much falls on a good times, bad times cycle. I think it really is that shitty meme of the good times create weak men create bad times thing.
Yeah.
I think that does hold a lot of weight. I think that in a lot of ways things go good, people get complacent, things go bad, and then the bad makes good. I think we've definitely seen that coming out of World War II, like all the shit that the well, not the silent, yeah, probably the silent generation went through. This the generation that went through World War II and the Depression,
Yeah.
and then they created the most opulent society in the history of the world. I don't know. We're we'll see. Um, I have another article from the New York Times, and this one is about the Justice Department trying to shift environmental justice efforts in terms of giving the environment teeth and legal recourse. This one was written by it looks like two editors who report on federal climate and environmental policy. She has broken multiple stories about Trump administration. Cool. All right, so let's get
Yeah.
into it. Last November, officials in Lowndes County, Alabama, began fielding inquiries from an uninspected inquisitor, the Justice Department, which had opened an investigation into the link between environmental racism and chronic water, flooding, and sanitation woes. The Biden administration's choices of Lowndes as the site as its first big environmental justice inquiry was based on the magnitude of the county's problems, but it also sent a message. The county was a voting rights battleground and a focal point of MLK Jr.'s march from Selma to Montgomery, making it a logical choice to open a new front on civil rights. That's an interesting point because it really is civil rights. It's the
Yeah.
right to live where you can have clean water. It's less. It's a more abstract form of racism than project housing or redlining or segregation or even lynching. Like it's very much a result of years of discrimination.
Yeah, that notion is very interesting because then you think about things like the Flint, Michigan crisis, which is still going on, and you realize
Mhm.
that, wait a minute, what were the events that led us here? Detroit became an industry town, and it was redlined heavily, and a large amount of African American people started living in that area outside of
Mhm.
Detroit. And then, as the area,
They
as
never
white
they
flight happened
got
and the
any of
industry
their
died, the people who couldn't afford to go out because they were working class jobs were stuck there. And as things
yeah.
deteriorated, no one could do much about it because the government was so corrupt.
They never got any of their lead pipes retrofitted
It would have cost $2,000 a year
to retrofit, like remove the lead pipes.
to retrofit.
Jesus.
It would have cost that much to maintain it and prevent it from starting.
That's probably all that combined is probably the salary of the head of the EPA of that region who got fired because of the whole thing.
Yeah. Even if that number was grossly underestimated and whatever media outlet put it out, that was only like, let's say, 1/10 of it. Even 20 grand a year to prevent your entire populace from having to deal with leaded water that can pretty much set back your entire population's IQ to like 20 years. It's
Ugh.
ridiculous. It was not a thing that should have ever happened.
So, all right then, moving on. Last week, Attorney General announced of Montgomery, I don't know, announced a series of policies intended to elevate the department's environmental justice efforts from the symbolic to the substantive. As President Biden's allies questioned the pace of other White House efforts to help Black and Hispanic communities hit hard by pollution, neglect, and climate change. Mr. Garland's most important step by far was the creation of an office inside the department responsible for addressing the harm caused by environmental crime, pollution, and climate change in communities of color in low income cities, towns, and countries. The new office is tiny, a 1.4 million operation tucked into a $35 billion department, but its ambitions are vast and very much a work in progress. It's a small staff of attorneys that will coordinate efforts across the department to use the sweeping power under Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to initiate investigations, negotiate civil settlements, and pursue criminal indictments in the most extreme cases. Okay. So let's take a look at what they were looking at. But several people unfamiliar with the process, speaking on the condition of anonymity to publicly discuss the matter, said potential targets for investigations were obvious to anyone who had followed the issue in recent years. They include a dense area of industrial refineries, oh my god, they include a dense area of industrial refineries and plants in Louisiana known as. Do you want to guess?
I'm sure it's gonna be something insane.
Cancer Alley.
Cancer Alley? That's what they
I mean,
call it?
that's pretty. It's pretty on the nose. All right. And also parts of the Texas coast, followed by petrochemicals and majority minority communities that have been relegated to low lying, flood prone areas without functioning water management infrastructure, like Cairo, Illinois. Yeah. And Sand Branch,
Yeah,
Texas.
baby.
Cairo, Illinois. People from Cairo are crabby. You ever been there?
I've never been actually.
I mean, it has its, like, Southern Illinois charm in terms of like there being like a like an off-brand gas, like a Sinclair gas station, with like that, like there's no attendant in there, and the bathroom looks how you'd expect, and there's nothing else.
Southern Illinois is more or less lost to time.
Oh, it's so weird. The only time you ever hear about Southern Illinois is during the governor races.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm convinced that like that's the only time they get any coverage at all. It's like they never vote in the general elections, or at least not for president, because they know what's going to happen. But like Illinois is a swing state when it comes to the governor races, because if the candidates can find the one single issue, this like almost everyone in Illinois is a single issue voter about one thing, in terms of it changes year to year. So like 2018, it probably had to be weed. As soon as you said weed, and as soon as Rauner didn't say weed, it was over.
Yeah.
Like it was actually over as soon as like Jay Pritzker was like, I know what the people want. It's weed.
JB Pritzker really said, we're going to legalize it. And every single person said, all right, bet. And he did.
And he
He had
did.
his
He did.
approval rating went through the roof.
I will give him credit. He did do what he said he was gonna do. And as such, he's running almost uncontested.
Yeah.
Yep. I love second term governor races in states where like they like the governor, because they're always such a circus. Like California's like that too, where like most people like the governor and he's basically gonna walk into a second term. And it's like the weirdest people are coming out to try to win this thing.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Moreover, every U.S. attorney has been instructed to dedicate lawyers to peruse environmental justice cases, and those prosecutors have a wide latitude to open their investigations, a force multiplier that should expand the effort far beyond department headquarters. That's why it's so important that these initiatives not only create a new office here in Washington, but also direct all 93 U.S. attorneys' offices across the country to proactively seek out information. Mr. Biden, who prevailed in the 2020 Democratic primaries by winning strong support from black voters. How did he win the primary? How did he do it?
Good
How did he
question.
do it? How did he do it? It was when Bernie Sanders had a gun pointed to his head and was like, "I'm endorsing Joe Biden." Did you watch that?
It's oh
Like
my god,
it,
it's
it,
awful.
it
And you
honest,
know,
it
like two
honestly
weeks
looked like he was
beforehand,
being.
he's in his campaign runs like, "Oh, like Sleepy Biden." Every single Democratic candidate had to immediately like double back and take back all of that stuff,
Oh
even though they
yeah,
meant it, and they still do. Because by
my
God, if Trump got a second term,
I was curious how old Bernie Sanders was, and I searched up Bernie Sanders' age, and like the number one result is Bernie Sanders age 2024. It's like people are still they're still on the Bernie train. I,
here's how
I'm
he
on the
can
Ber
still win, guys.
I'm on the Bernie train too. I just don't want it to be Bernie.
Pebble Throw is a Nazi, but
I
the
I
one
I
comic,
want some,
here's how Bernie can still win, is incredibly
I
funny.
want at the very least a baby boomer in the office.
Yeah.
Is it too much to hope that I can have someone under the age of 75 in the White House?
Yeah.
Or is that too much of an ask now?
It might be.
And it's like, no, I'll take the fascist, but someone who's 86 is a bridge too far. Ugh. All right. He was the first president to embrace environmental justice. Good God, that's depressing. Um, One of his first actions was to issue an executive order directing the Justice Department to ensure comprehensive attention to environmental justice. I'm convinced that you honestly could have just said Biden's only productive day in office was the first 2 hours he was actually in office.
Yeah.
Is that when he undid most of the Trump administration in the form of like a stack of executive orders like 3 feet tall?
That's just going to become the norm now. Every president is going to have that one photo of them from day one where you can barely see their face behind all the executive orders. It's just going to be swinging back and forth like that.
All right, hold on. I'm trying to find the picture. That's the picture. There we go. That. Oh, cool. He's got a different pen for each of them.
What do you think
Oh
they
my
did with the
god.
pens afterwards?
Uh, Decontaminated them.
Put them back into circulation like it's like a coin mint.
That's a lot of executive orders. Good God. Well, okay, this is a funny headline. Joe Biden wasted no time scrubbing the Cheeto stains out of the nation's collective rug. All right, Vanity Fair. You win. You win that one. All right. Anyway. Oh, shit. I missed my article. There we go. All right, so one of his first actions as president was to issue an executive order directing the Justice Department to ensure comprehensive attention to environmental justice. Enforcement of environmental regulations slackened during President Donald. Why are you calling him Mr. Biden, but you're saying President Donald J. Trump? New York Times. Bro. All right. And his aides scrapped several key initiatives, including a program that required companies to bankroll community infrastructure investments instead of paying fines for violations of environmental law. Okay. Still, Mr. Biden's agenda has been hampered by delays and staffing turnover, prompting activists to worry that the administration could fall short of its promises to make environmental justice a priority across all parts of the federal government. No shit. Last week, the White House Council on Environmental Quality tapped. Oh, I mean, I like tapped on the shoulder, not wiretapped your phone. Jalone J. White Newsom, a longtime advocate for environmental equity, to be its senior director for environmental justice. She will help oversee the Biden administration's completion of a sweeping screening tool that tries to identify communities bearing the brunt of environmental damages. Its goal is to help fulfill another presidential promise to deliver 40% of the benefits of federal investment in environmental cleanup, energy, and climate migration in disadvantaged communities. The, that's less than half, but all right. Don't you think it should be at least 50%?
Yeah. Oh my
Federal.
gosh.
Okay, so the letter is federal investments in environmental cleanup, clean energy, and climate mitigation. Okay. It seems like disadvantaged communities make up more than 40% of the population, but I could be
I'd
wrong.
argue it's much, much more. Aren't
I
they
think that
usually
if
urban?
I think that if the the 90 what is it? I'm looking up, it's not 90. Seeing as the top 10% hold about 80% of the wealth, I think that's bullshit. Okay.
Hmm.
Interesting. All right, moving on.
Yeah. How many more of these do you got?
I'm not done with the article. Seeing as we're almost an hour in, I'm probably gonna finish up with this one because I had
Yeah.
another one, but it's kind of the same as the first one, but it's from
Fair
Global
enough.
Citizen. Instead of protecting the entire foundation for the justice system, they set up a new environmental justice unit this week. Blah 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 blah. Our failing ruling class in a nutshell. Wait, what? Instead of protecting the entire foundation of the justice system, A.G. Garland set up a new environmental justice unit last week. Adam Paul Laxant, a Republican and former Nevada Attorney General who is running for the Senate, our failed ruling class in a nutshell. Conservatives seized on the announcement as proof that Democrats are more interested in using federal law enforcement to pursue liberal political goals than addressing the national increase in violent crime. Oh my goodness. Ugh. You trying to explain crime statistics to a conservative is like oil and water.
Ugh. I
Have you ever
wonder
tried to do
why.
that?
I wonder
Have,
why
have
they
you
have
ever
more
like
convictions.
bro of course there's no crime in your red state because you live in bumfuck like Lancaster County where there's four people and you all know each other.
Yeah.
Like you ever been to a city in a red state? Man, it is sad. Y'all ever been to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or like New Orleans, or
Visit their fabulous downtown.
you seen crime in New Orleans? Crime in Florida? Crime in Texas? It is, and like crime in California for the most part, it's just cars getting broken into or shoplifting. It's a lot less getting killed or starving to death on the street. Well, there's those in there too, but like it's like, oh, you can't. The New York Times had another piece on this, and it was more often what people feel is going to carry more weight than whatever peer-reviewed study you can pull out. Like, people are going to believe the anecdote of their friend of a friend who lives on the coast who's like, yeah, there's crime here. And they're going to say, well, blue state, well, there's crime in blue states, and then you're not going to be able to convince them otherwise.
Yeah.
Or or someone who's like, who I don't know, like one of those tech workers who moves to San Francisco or wherever from like the middle of nowhere, who's like, oh my god, there's so much crime here, and then moves to Austin or something, and then disappears off the face of the earth. And it's like, well, how about you talk to someone who's lived there for like 30 years? And it's like, well, it's about the same, or if anything, it's gone down. Or if you talk to someone who's lived in a red state city who's actually open about their opinions, they'll be like, yeah, crime sucks.
Yeah.
it's such like a good strategy though to just capitalize on the liberals don't want to do anything about violent crime. Like, have you seen all the attorney general ads like on YouTube or on there? And it's like the anti Kim Fox or whoever.
I have
Uh,
not actually.
so Kim Fox is the Cook County DA, and her and the DA of San Francisco County, so Chisa Bowden, have come under fire for trying to explore new alternatives to cash bail or um, less sentencing for nonviolent crimes like larceny or burglary. And for the most part, that's good stuff, except for the fact that they tried these policies right before a violent crime wave started. So even though the two are unrelated, you can't convince people of that.
Yeah.
So Chisa Bowden in San Francisco is having a recall election this week. Might or might not happen. Kim Fox is gonna maybe survive. Whether she'll definitely get reelected, but like, all right. So what about the EPA? The EPA also has the power to investigate violations of federal environmental laws and has stepped up its enforcement actions in the community's color under the administration. Over the past year, the EPA has reached a $118 million settlement with Chevron Phillips to resolve clean air violations in Texas, halted operations in a refinery in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and ordered officials in Clarksburg, West Virginia to provide an alternative source of drinking water or remove electric from customers affected by high levels of the containment, many of them black. You know you're in Appalachia when the town ends in Berg.
Oh yeah.
Like, goodness God. Like, I'm gonna like hover over like West Virginia real quick on Google Maps. There's also some admittedly charming sound names. It seems Ville too. Prestonburg, Williamsburg, Lewisburg, uh, Barbersville. Yeah, you get the point.
Yeah.
There's some stupid towns there. Um, Whitesburg. Okay. Anyway, oh, God, I keep losing my goddamn article.
That's fine.
All right, there we go. Um, yeah. So from what I understand, it's a lot of it comes down to the states in this situation of running up against the the federal government might be trying to investigate all these cases of environmental injustice, but a state could just say no, nothing's wrong. Or why aren't you focusing on crime?
Why aren't you focusing on crime? And it's like, we'll get there when we get there.
It's like maybe we don't focus on crime right now. Maybe we focus on the more existential threat of something that's actually happening. Ugh.
And it's like, but didn't you hear the news? And it's like, you watch the
No,
news?
I didn't. You don't watch the news. You heard it from like you
You
heard
heard
it
it
from
from
the guy.
Pamela in the grocery checkout line.
You heard it from Pamela at the Farm and Fleet.
It's, oh my god, did you hear they're putting razor blades in our kids' candy? And it's like, you did not hear that on CN. Like,
My favorite is putting edibles in the kids' candy. It's like no one's giving your kids their edibles.
someone bought that gram for $20. They're not gonna waste it on some dumb kid. There's a there's a big rainbow outside my window right now.
Wow, it's a nice sunset. I can't see no rainbow though. I I'm always thinking it's like the right has all these places to organize. Like they got church, they got the Farm and Fleet. Where does the left organize?
Good question.
Like we
Panera
don't
bread?
have the Farm and Fleet. Um we have the Starbucks, although not anymore. We got Discord.
It's Discord. It's all decentralized
The
servers.
Be bisexual, eat hot chip, and lie. Apparently, public schools. I don't know, and that gets to the bigger question of how does the left organize?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really have a centralized platform, although I guess you could say since being left of center is the status quo right now, it's everywhere. But that's a little bit of a cop out.
It's not only a cop out, and it's also the whole left of center argument is true if you consider leftism to fundamentally be the party of advancement, which in a lot of ways it is. But I think that the term socially left only goes to describe things that have become so commonplace that people have just gotten used to it, like gay marriage.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure, but like that's a weird question of organization. Anyway, that's kind of it for me.
yeah. I mean, any shout outs?
Uh, Ukraine, obviously, all the
Yeah,
people in
obviously.
city of Buffalo. Uh, Apparently, just I was on looked at the news, city of Los Angeles.
Yeah. Shout out to all the high schoolers out there that have gotten through their APs and gotten through the suffering and get to do it next year.
Well, no. When are the IB exams?
Hmm?
When are the IB exams? The IB exams. No, they already happened. Wait, no. This is still going on. It's like all month. It's
Oh
dope.
man.
But I hate IB kids, so like that doesn't matter.
IB kids on their way to cope about paying 20 grand in tuition for an for
It's
an
like
inner city
it's like
school.
it, but it's internationally recognized.
Are you going to an international school?
Are you going to the? It's like taking the park test. It was only important if you were moving. Ugh. All right. Anyway, I need to figure out how to get the piece of trash that took from my place of business to work.
Ah, I'm gonna enjoy the
Ugh.
rainbow outside.
Very much so. I'm